Good afternoon, everyone. Got some echo here. Okay. Yeah, I think that's me as well. So we'll try this again. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we've got rid of the echoes. I'm Councillor Chris Pettingill here at the District of Squamish for our Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, January 25th. Hallan Squalin Quist Tla Squamish Okmail. Welcome to the Squamish Nation, unceded and traditional territory. Can I have someone move adoption of the agenda? Councillor French moves, Councillor Ray seconds. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Moving quickly along, we have a delegation from the Ambulance Paramedics of BC. So I'll turn it over to, not sure if I'm going to Troy or Sherman.
I will start and then Sherman will join if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Welcome.
You want me to just go? So it's about a 10-minute presentation and conversation, and then I was going to open it up to questions as well. So that's okay.
Oh, do you have two devices on? We're getting a lot of feedback.
No, I don't. It's the one.
Eric? I think that might be you. Okay.
See, they just have a little red mic.
Eric?
How's that?
Okay, I apologize about that. Some technical difficulties here.
That's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead, Troy.
Thank you again. So I'll start with, I just want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the Coast Salish Musqueam territories in Vancouver of the people, and we provide services across the whole province, as you know, and I appreciate the time today to join you and your council. I just have a brief conversation, just an overview of where we're at. I sent out a package, a lot of reading, but I'll sort of touch on what that is and what that means and why we've reached out and into these conversations. But joining me today is Sherman Hillier, who's our national staff rep, but he's also been a paramedic for in our service, and he's on leave working with national and providing services, but he's a resident in Squamish as well. So what I try and do is have somebody join me from around the province when I meet with the municipalities or councillors from the areas. And so some of you may already know Sherman from his other various jobs, but he's worked in the Sea to Size corridor for quite a few years, both in his paramedic role and in his servicing role. So Sherman, do you want to have anything to add just quickly before I go into the presentation? Send greetings. Is he muted? Are you muted, Sherm? He looks lost. We definitely have challenges today. Well, I'll let him figure it out, and then I'll just jump right in here. Okay, so thank you again for having us join you. Really, this is an initiative. I've been a paramedic for 34 years now across the province, and I've into my second term as president of the Ambulance Paramedics, and I know a lot of people laugh at me and say, "What the heck are you doing at the end of your career?" But it really emphasizes that I've spent my professional and working career across this province really advocating for our service we do and our members and the profession. So that's why I'm doing this. And little did I know when I got asked a couple of years ago to take this role on, the challenges we had. But I think you're all in that situation that this last couple of years was nothing any of us ever expected or planned for. So I'm into my second term as president of 4,500 members, that's paramedics, dispatchers, and support workers across BC. So in every community, including Squamish, we represent and advocate for it. We're unique in a couple of ways as a union and profession, is that in BC, we are the union, obviously, that represents paramedics and does all the traditional roles of a union. but we have a dual role in BC that we're also the professional voice of paramedics and dispatchers in BC. And what I mean by that is in most jurisdictions across Canada, you have a professional voice, a professional body or college, and a union that represents the paramedics. In BC, we've always had the role of both since our inception. And why that works in this BC, it's just the way we're set up in BC with the legislation. We have been lobbying for self-regulation in our own college, but that is still a number of years off. But what that does is we're the BC chapter of the Paramedic Association of Canada. So that's why you see conversations like this. That's why you see us advocating for patient care, increased scope, service delivery areas that are not traditional roles of a union. And the reason we do that, and we're very proud of what we do, is because that's how our members identify. They want more training, they want more advocacy, they want to help their patients. And so it works very well for us, but we still believe in self-regulation and we've been working considerably with the ministry on that for a number of years, and it's still a ways off. So the other unique role that we have in BC is our dual role in public safety and healthcare. And a lot of people want to discuss the different, where that fits and either pigeonhole us into one or the other. And what I mean by public safety is your police, fire, your public safety disciplines, which you're familiar with as a municipality, and emergency management and that whole side of things, Coast Guard, rescue, all those sorts of things are considered the public safety designations. And we are actually designated under the CRA as a public safety occupation, which allows us for the early retirement provisions and that. In BC, the ambulance paramedics were moved away from a standalone sort of public safety entity a number of years ago and moved into the Provincial Health Services Authority, which is one of the health authorities under the provincial Ministry of Health. So that's who is our overriding employer, which BCEHS, British Columbia Emergency Health Services, another mouthful of acronym, is an entity under the Provincial Health Services, just like the Cancer Agency and that. So that's why we have a dual role between healthcare and public safety. And we're proud of that dual role because that's how we identify, but that's also allows us to clinically be in the best practices for our scope and treatment of our patients. But it also allows us to interact with our public safety partners, particularly the police and fire and first responders. And that's really where you see us the most, is in the communities and in emergency planning. And the reason I raise all these things is that two things: to educate, and most of you probably know most of this stuff, but never heard it in that context maybe. And the other big thing is that really to talk about the state of the ambulance service right now in BC and in communities like yours. And so I made it an effort about 2.5 years ago to really focus on our relationship that I identified that we didn't have the way we should probably at the municipal levels. Even though our partners in public safety fall under municipal funding and that, and we fall under the Ministry of Health, who is responsible for providing ambulance services, there is an interaction between at the municipal level. That's who we work with on a day in and day out, is the healthcare staff in the hospital, but the police and fire and emergency services. And really why I raised that is over the last couple of years, and since our move into the provincial health services, we've digressed from our emergency preparedness and that public safety identity. And that was really exposed, particularly last summer leading up into the heat dome. After the heat dome, the ambulance service was questioned publicly by the media. And that was on in July, at the end of June and early July. And they questioned our emergency preparedness or lack of it. And when I say us, I mean the ambulance service, but we identify as all. And that's well documented. And we know the tragedies that we've seen in the province with, over 600 people that died during that time frame, and the challenges we've seen in every community. But to the point where the Minister of Health made significant announcements following the heat dome in BC with on July 14th, he made a number of announcements and enhancements of the ambulance service. And the biggest thing that he did was appointing in response to that. And we worked closely with him to develop that announcement. And a couple of things that he did. He put a new chief ambulance officer in place, Leanne Heppel, who was interim and had just been announced as a permanent position now. And he reconstituted a board, the BCEHA board, that would oversee all ambulance operations within the PHSA. So in previous, the PHSA board oversaw us. And that's being chaired by Jim Chu, and it's been filled in since then by a number of well-profiled and competent leaders. So that was finalized in December. But Jim Chu, many of you might know, is a former police chief in Vancouver. And he's done a remarkable job in getting that on. And one of the big advantages we've seen is the education of not having to educate them on that role of public safety. But one of the other things that was identified, there was a number of enhancements into the ambulance service that were put in. A number of positions were added, following up to positions that were added in the Howe Sound prior to that as part of the lead up to that through our negotiation last time. And that was putting a 24-hour ambulance into Squamish, Whistler, and Lions Bay, which are sort of the surrounding thing. We went from day ambulances to 24-hour full-time ambulances at the primary response unit. So those were enhancements that were put in place, as well as some temporary resources. And I'll explain that a little more in a moment. But he also recognized that the emergency preparedness was not done. And that's where we've digressed in our relationship. Because we all know, and you guys know well, with emergency preparedness, EOCs, and the interaction between the agencies in a response to whether it be a motor vehicle accident or a major event is crucial, planning and preparedness. And we haven't done that as an ambulance service with the municipalities the way we used to. And I think leading up into UBCM, and that's where we've engaged the municipalities on a better, how can we work and plan and prepare better for disasters should they have, and major incidents should they come up. And that's really where we're at right now, is that we've in the later on, the other announcement was around mental health and wellness and the supports that are needed, because we're seeing the highest number of mental health claims and support services needed in the ambulance service. So WorkSafe numbers are saying up to 30% of our members, paramedics and dispatchers, are either off on WorkSafe psychological injury claims or in treatment through our critical incident stress program. And that's the highest of any injury. So the announcements provided supports for that, which will help us enhance our supports for paramedics in the field. But the other announcement that came in December was an enhancement of the need to have to move towards a better emergency preparedness system within the ambulance service to work with our partners. And that's really welcomed by us. So that's in the works to do that. But when I started and Sherman started, we used to work and plan and do exercises in the communities with our partners in police and fire and emergency. That digressed over the years. And I think that's really highlighted and was exposed this summer that we didn't do that. So through the fall, we started seeing increased numbers of out of service, where 30% of our staff across the province are out of service because we just don't have our ability to recruit and retain paramedics. And that's, I'll be blunt, that's largely because of our precarious on-call model, which is a hybrid in the Howe Sound and Squamish, but also our ability to offer full-time meaningful wages and benefits. And that's an old model that has proven not sustainable and had been exposed the last couple of years. And unfortunately, it's not unique to your corridor. We're seeing out of service levels with our backup ambulances in your community, the secondary ambulances. And as you know, we're transporting a lot of patients up and down that corridor to the tertiary care in town. But we need more resources in your communities. And that's where really this is about a conversation with you, how we can work together and support you and help you lobby for and make sure that you're getting the services in your community that is a responsibility of Minister's Health. And, you know, the other big thing is that, you know, every municipality is under pressure budget-wise, and making sure that you get the proper funding and not download it into the communities. You know, when healthcare is a responsibility under the provincial mandate, then we need to make sure that they're providing the services in your community that your community deserves, obviously. So that's really sort of my overview of where we're at. And it just really, this is establishing a relationship and contacts and some information. And there's another thing that's in there that you might want to read about it. And the community paramedic program, we've established a number of years ago across the province, and they're up in Pemberton and in more remote and rural communities, but we haven't transitioned to more urban and metro. And what that does is called mitigation. So it's not just about more ambulances. We need to make sure that mental health and addiction, because we know the best place for them is not necessarily in 911, in the emergency system. The support they need, and every community, including yours, is not immune to the homeless and addictions and mental health. And it's a big challenge for society. But we know that the default is call an ambulance and go to the emergency department, and that's not the best place necessarily for care unless they're having an emergency crisis. So we need to also mitigate things, and that's where I bring up the community paramedic program. Communities like Squamish are well positioned to have a more urban metro community paramedic that can provide call medication and support in the community, their wellness checks, if you will. And there's a document that I've attached that outlines what that really is about. And every time I've talked to communities or the provincial government, there's a real support for this. So we've been really lobbying for that expansion of that program to more urban and metro communities that have those needs, but they don't have the supports in the community. And it's not to replace community support, it's to enhance it and to provide those wellness checks and referrals for people. So that's a lot of information at you, and I'm sure you'll have some questions. I just want to pass over to Sherman. I see you had some technical issues, but you're back. Can you jump on here and just I was trying to do an introduction for you and just but I got it out there. So if you had anything to add, and then we'll open it up to questions from council and Mayor Elliott.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for your time, everybody. Appreciate it. I am a Squamish resident. I'm up in the Highlands right now on Friedel Crescent. That's where I'm broadcasting to all of you from. It's sort of weird, we're in the same town, but we're in different rooms. But and my apologies, it was some of a technical glitch here. But I just to give you a quick little background on without getting too much to me, but I might be able to give you some local flavor. Is that I now work for QP as the national servicing representative. We're identified as, and got a little partner. Sorry, I'll. Somebody's home from school today. So I do. I've been a paramedic though since 1998, and in fact, I was the supervisor in charge of Lions Bay for a period of time. And technically, I'm the supervisor. I'm on a leave of Whistler, but I've been on a long-term leave for some time now. But we have a unique area here, lots of opportunity, and of course, as no surprise to any of you folks that. We have an increased volume of people who come through our area on the weekends, and that is increasing, and we haven't kept up the pace in terms of the growth of community needs. I was way back when was one of the people who was involved in creating the community paramedic program, as was Troy, way back a number of years ago, and I think there's a lot of potential for call mitigation and something like that throughout the corridor. It doesn't necessarily have to be just Squamish, but Squamish and area. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that we certainly could talk about and really try to support all the municipalities in the corridor to try and services here for us. So I won't take any more time than that. My apologies again for the technical glitch, but I'll back over to you, Troy.
Yeah, and just one other comment. We tragically know that, or we know that the highway is challenging for us, and it provides a lot of unfortunately work for us and stress for a lot of commuters and people, and we see irregular occurrences. And I think one of the things that you get a motor vehicle accident on that corridor, and we're out of service with down to one ambulance in each community, or have other calls going on, or multiple transfers. You can deplete the resources in that whole corridor very quickly, and it's not easy to get another ambulance in there. And that's where Sherman was talking about not kept pace. It's a growing area with a demographic that's growing, as you know, better than I do. And like the Fraser Valley, we know historically across the province, ambulance call volume goes up by 6% every year. And in growing areas like yours or the Fraser Valley, it goes up in all higher numbers. So, and with these out of service numbers that we're seeing, at times 30-40% of the ambulances in the lower mainland, which is the Howe Sound, as well as all the way through out to Hope, we have 120 transport capable ambulances, but at some times we're having up to 50 of them out of service. And that really impacts. So what happens when you have North Shore ambulances, Bay gets pulled down, everybody can get pulled down, and then that leaves communities shorthanded or out of service, or one ambulance will be covering multiple communities. And that's really where it affects patient outcomes. And that's why you see me in the news raising this, sounding the alarm, and that, because in reality, this is happening on a regular basis in your communities. And that people say to me, why you're undermining the public, but we have to have these conversations, and tough conversations, because we need to add additional ambulances up there and not support the out of service models that have unfortunately led us there. So I'll close off with that, and I probably stimulated a lot of questions or discussions.
Yes, thank you very much. And just a side note, we love having our young residents join us, so it's fantastic to see. I'll go to Mayor Elliott and then Councillor French.
Yes, not the first time we've had small visitors into a council meeting. So thank you so much for joining us today. I have a few questions, and I guess where I'll start is that sometimes with the model under which you're governed and funded, it's difficult to know now where to lobby. So now we have this board, chaired by Mr. Chu, and then we have PHSA, and then we have the Ministry of Health. And so where is the local government to go to sort of advocate for its needs? Because we have all these layers.
Well, you're asking the right person, because I've worked with a lot of municipalities. And as you know, last summer, or hopefully we were able to enhance the ambulance service and convert a lot of communities to 24-hour ambulances. For instance, Revelstoke, I worked very closely with Revelstoke Council to lobby, particularly the Minister of Health, because he's ultimately the one that needs to take the funding forward, and he oversees the ambulance service and the health authorities. David Byers is the new CEO, and he worked in the Ministry of Health and president of Provincial Health Services Authority, and Jim Chu. So those are the best resources to lobby. From an operational perspective, it's the senior leadership at BCHS, which is Neil Lilly and the new chief ambulance officer in Leanne Heppel. So from a resource and funding perspective, it's definitely the Ministry of Health. With the senior leadership, and they work closely with it. And we can help communities. I've done it with White Rock and other urban and Kamloops and where I'm from. So there's ways we can help support and ask the right questions and be supportive in those communities. But that's really where the structure lies. From an operational perspective, if you have questions about what's provided in your community, and I've provided that document that breaks down the service level, and it's pretty bare bones compared to what a lot of communities have. Around the world, you compare to that level, and the having one 24-hour ambulance in Squamish is definitely well under what communities of that size and demographic would be needing. And that's things like and plus you talk about things like in the north where it's so farther between communities. It's no different for you. You can't get another ambulance in there quickly, and you can't always get air resources in there because of the weather conditions. So those are all challenges we have, and there's no question in my mind the evidence would support more additional resources and community support.
I would also say, sorry.
No, go ahead, Mr. Hillier.
I was just going to add that, we certainly, as Troy's talking about, we look to be a partner, of course, and it's tough for municipalities often to, what I hear oftentimes is a municipality will say, we have a question about the ambulance service, so they go to the fire chief, which would be a natural decision, right? Okay, that they are our emergency people we have a relationship with, but, really it's important to have that relationship with us, because they don't, taking away from the fire chief, but they don't know, it's not their world, the same world that we're in. So certainly, please reach out to us anytime you can to try and assist with any lobbying efforts that you need, or just information. If you have a question about anything, anytime, just reach out to one of us. And we have a bit of I think one thing to watch as well that's unique to this area is we do get that swell of tourism, right? Which is all great. We get that big swell, and sometimes we get looked at our population as being what our residents are in each community, and that would establish sort of a level of service. But here in this community, you have a hospital. So hospitals create a transfer volume. And that's always an issue here for this community. It's a great problem to have, more so to speak. We have this fantastic hospital, but we also have an increased volume of transfers that have to come from this hospital into other places and back home. That will burn up resources very quickly. And over the years, that's been 2 physical trucks that would, right now we're upset, but 2 physical trucks that would try to deal with that and then reach the surrounding communities. And that model just doesn't work here anymore. We're just too busy for that. There's too much potential, and sometimes it's hard to lobby on potential, but we're a unique area where we don't really have to look very far to say, look, we can have devastating car accidents and things on this highway. So we really need those resources available, and we have inclement weather and these kinds of things, and that can change your response dramatically. So it's a bit of a trap where we'll fall into, well, you have this many people, so you get sort of this much in way of emergency services, but that doesn't really hold true in this corridor.
You don't staff for the peaks and you don't staff for the lows, right? But that's the beauty of the ambulance service, having the ability provincially to move resources around in those peak times. But when you're already at bare bones, it prevents you. So to answer your question, the provincial government, Ministry of Health is obviously the primary funding resources, and we can tear it down from there depending on what the issue is or challenge.
All right. And Chair, I just have one follow-up question. What happens in Squamish? Well, in fact, I think what happens in Bowen Island can affect Lions Bay, Squamish, Whistler, and Pemberton. So when I think about pulling information together and looking at what the model should be for Squamish, it feels like I should be doing that with Whistler and Pemberton at the very least. And so is that sort of a recommended approach, that if we're going to design an operational model and look at a funding ask, that we're doing that on a corridor basis rather than a community by community?
Absolutely. You need to, and that's why I sent you the community profiles you probably haven't had a chance. I just got it to you this morning, but I sent you the community profile for right from Lions Bay to Pemberton. That really, and I think you can't look at it. You can look at things in geographical clusters like you described, but you can't look at Squamish in isolation if you don't address Whistler's challenges, because all you'll do is, if we put more resources into Squamish, they're just going to be up in Whistler if we don't address Whistler's issues. So that's what you're absolutely bang on, Mayor Elliott, in that, and having those conversations. I've done that with, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because Valemont, McBride, Clearwater, and Blue River, we've talked about that. They're clustered because they only have one hospital in that corridor, and it's the same sort of thing. You can't look at them in isolation, just like you can't look at the South Okanagan in isolation. So we have those scenarios all over the whole province that is exactly that, and you can look at I think you need to have those conversations, and I'm actually meeting with Jack, the mayor of Whistler, here coming up soon. So and I've been chatting with Pemberton. So I really made it a conscious effort to engage the municipalities and have these discussions so they understand where to go to and what they're entitled to. So obviously, we're passionate about this stuff, and I'm already conscious of time, but I could talk for days on this, so you'll have to cut me off. And so could Sherman.
Okay, thank you. And we do have 5 more minutes slated, but I see lots of questions from council. So if our guests are okay, we'll tentatively go to 1:45, but if everyone can keep their questions tight, that would be appreciated. And I will go to Councillor French and then Councillor Herford.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for sharing those community profile sheets, and specifically the one on Squamish indicates 2 daytime emergency paramedics resources and 2 nighttime. So I'm wondering if you might explain these numbers with a bit deeper and provide a little bit more context around these 2 and 2 statistics.
So it's actually changed since that profile was done, because of what we have is the Premier announced the surge resources for COVID. So we have temporary additional resources in each of the communities up there, with an additional day resource, which is a spare board, or like a full-time resource, but covered by on-call members. So we have one 24-hour ambulance that's staffed by 2 paramedics on a 4-on, 4-off rotation now. So that's a paired ambulance, and that's 2 days, 2 nights, and then 4 days off. So that's how you have 8 full-time paramedics. And that's your primary response ambulance. Then we have a secondary call-out ambulance, which is called Kilo, which is a people can be at home or and they respond in for emergencies or inter-hospital transfers. And that's the base staffing that's historically happened. What's happened is we've added an additional Juliet surge resource, temporary resource, which we're in actually discussions with the Ministry of Health and senior leadership to make those permanent. And there's 55 and 5 is what that's called from the Rural and Remote and Indigenous Framework. That's a mouthful. And the 5 air resources were added in the province, 2 helicopters and 3 fixed wing as temporary measures for surge resources. But the announcement also said, how will those become permanent after surge? And that's what we're in discussions right now. So we anticipate gaining another resource out of that. So I hope that answers your question. And it's similar staffing in the other communities around you, the additional surge resources, Whistler, Pemberton. And then we have what's called a temporary advanced care PRU, a single responder, which is an advanced care unit based out of Whistler. And that could end up down in your community in that. And we're looking at making those advanced care units permanent in the province as well through that process.
Yeah, that's great context. And so just as a follow-up, I noticed that Whistler in the information sheet also has 2 and 2 daytime, 2 nighttime. And I was surprised by that. Sorry, say that again?
Additional surge resource too, that additional ambulance.
Okay, I was mostly anticipating that I would see Whistler with higher numbers because of Whistler Blackcomb operations, summer, winter skiing, mountain biking, and the number of calls that I know paramedic teams are making to the mountains to deal with people with broken body parts from skiing and cycling. Okay, but I think you kind of partially answered my next question. I wonder if you could give us like a 30-second crash course on the lingo for the types of paramedics that we have. So I've heard full-time paramedics, but then there's the Kilo, the Juliet.
Okay.
Could you give us just a bit of that, the employment types?
Yeah, so sorry about that. We get caught up in our world, right? So as far as the Kilo and Alpha, and those are just staffing models and designations of the ambulances. So they're the type of shift they work. So full-time ambulance is full-time paramedics available at the station. On-call or Kilo is on-call members, part-time generally, that are backfill full-time shifts or fill those secondary ambulances. So that's the easiest way to describe them. And then there's various shift patterns that can be used as opposed to the 24-hour ambulance. And then levels of care, and there's some information in there about levels of care, is we have what's called an EMR, which is your base level, entry level, emergency medical responder. Then you have your primary care paramedic, PCP, if you will, which is what your staffing level in Squamish is, and most places in the province. That's our baseline scheduling or staffing or license level, if you wish, of care. And then you have advanced care paramedics, which are ACP, which is that specialized unit in Whistler that responds and in the city. And they are layered in for cardiacs, more serious calls. They're layered in response with the PCP or the primary care units. And then we have another level that's higher than that, and that's a critical care paramedic. And there's 2 designations in there. There's adult critical care, and then there's the infant transport team. And the infant transport team is based out of Children's and will go anywhere in the province, either in helicopters or jets or by road. And you'll see them come up to your corridor when the weather's not done, when they have a child or a high-risk maternity. But the critical care are the ones that come in the helicopter based out of Vancouver, Kamloops, Prince George, Prince Rupert, and over in Nanaimo now. So those are the levels of care, and they're strategically located. So base level in most communities is primary care paramedic, and then there's the on-call model of people that are on-call part-time, and then full-time paramedics.
Great, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Herford and then Councillor Race.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It's been learning lots as we go through this. My question, I think Mr. Hillier touched on sort of the load of transfers, and so I'll leave that. But I think currently, is there is there no scaling for weekend, I'd say throughout the summer, or even, I mean, in the winter, there's more traffic on the highway, which is higher percentage chance of incidents. So am I correct that there's nothing, and any kind of surge resources we've been talking about are strictly COVID related? Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have the ability to upstaff. Historically, they, like, from a physical ambulance perspective, Whistler for a while was doing a day and afternoon ambulance on a surge capacity during the winter months, and we've been lobbying for that to become a permanent resource, because and so that we have the capacity and the ability to do it. Right now, we don't have the staff because of our ability to recruit into it, and they have not added those additional positions even on a temporary basis. So you're right. We have, you'll hear it's a restriction of our collective agreement. Absolutely not. We have the capacity to have flexible scheduling in our collective agreement and those sorts of things. So it's really whether, and those are the kind of things we can lobby for, is that when you have these peak time, I work in Asuyas, and, Canada Day, we have 30,000 people at Canada Day in Asuyas for a town that's 6,000 or 7,000 people. So it's the same sorts of things when you see some of these Okanagan communities, and we put on special events units that have a major, we'll put on additional resources. Symphony of Fire in Vancouver, we have special events. That was changed, and we've now been able to bring that back to prepare for large events. And you've seen it up in Pemberton when you have these large events. And the reason they've moved out of municipalities is because of bylaws and restrictions to have more policing, because you guys can't be saddled with those monies. So they're starting to looking at unrestricted areas, so they don't have to pay for, well, we won't pay for contract ambulances. We'll just call 911 when we need help. And that's why the pressure's on municipalities for these major events. So these event people are going to other ones. Go ahead, Sherman.
I'll say here specifically in Squamish, you would have seen the upstaffing when we had our music festivals. It's been a number of years now, but I don't know if you'll recall. I believe we had the little gators running around, and I think there was folks on bike staff. So that's specialized units that used to come up with the local staff and additional paramedics. They did it in Pemberton at the music festival. But to your point of, we see that kind of swell on the weekends, but it's not an event. So we don't add to that. That's just the swell on the weekends, and so we could upstaff, but no, we don't.
A simple solution would be add another ambulance on weekends if the needs are there, right? And upstaff it. And so we have the capacity to do that, but they're generally not a plan. And that's kind of something you guys could lobby and we could work with you on. And that's something we're looking at through our review and recommendations, but we haven't been able to move that type of staffing very far in the previous leadership of BCHS. But I think with the new board, with Jim Chu, and understanding the dynamics of surges and additional needs, I think we're in a better position than we've ever been right now for change and advocating. They've been put in place to look at the ambulance service with a new lens and put a 3-year plan together. And those are the kind of things that we need to address moving forward.
Thank you. And I've heard the term bare bones battered around in a couple times here. So on that same topic of that surge need, we'll call it, for the weekend service and so on, this isn't simply a scheduling issue. It's additional resources required for that time, not scaling down what's being provided throughout the week. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, and it's funding. It's funding too, because they have set funding, and every time you add additional, wages and benefits, all these things come with, it's no different than you try and schedule more police and fire on a weekend because of an event. Somebody has to pay for that, and that's where the challenge traditionally comes with the Ministry of Health. But at the end of the day, the system will be maxed either way. The calls are coming, but we still have to deal with it. So avoiding it doesn't make the problem go away. It just puts more pressure on the system.
Thank you. One more, if that's okay, Chair. I was curious. Highway 99 does have a reputation of having accidents that cause lots of injuries and also backup traffic. And I was wondering, in general, sort of the impact of those times on the service that you folks can provide, as far as being able to move on the highway. When you're doing maybe an urgent transfer and there's an accident, or some other scenario such as this, or trying to bring in additional resources to backfill the people that are tied up with a motor vehicle accident on the highway. And can you speak to sort of that your ability to be mobile in that time, and any particular cruxes you think we can support you in attempting to address?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, we deal with safety challenges on the highway, Coquihalla, all these tough highways. It proves challenging. That's we have some pretty robust safety, and that's where I think working with our partners from a safety perspective. But it can really limit our access to get patients through, and hopefully you can utilize air resources. We've seen this with Hope and the Coquihalla recently, and your highway being closed. It really put pressures on isolation and how we get people moved around. It's challenging at best, but I think making sure we have emergency backup plans as best we can, and preparedness and safety measures in place, and lobbying for better highways and more safer things are always the good thing. Dividers, those sorts of natural things that are, again, that's under the Ministry of Health. The Minister of Highways and the provincial government mandate, but you work closely with them on that. So those are the kind of things that you lobby for as a municipality that meet your needs. But it's definitely put pressure on the system, making sure we have enough air resources that can get into those isolated or single highway communities. Sorry, Sherman, I know you had something.
No, I was just going to say, from my time working in Lions Bay, the choke point for us is Lions Bay. And so what can happen here with the response if we get a catastrophic car accident like we have, at this point, I'm not going to say, and this is anecdotal, that we're any worse. I've worked all over the province. I worked in Hope on the Coquihalla and saw some devastating car accidents there. I've worked here and seen some devastating ones. And I've seen regular accidents as well. What's unique about here is the winding stretch through Lions Bay, just north of Lions Bay, the corner where I forget the name of the corner that we get all the accidents on, or had. That can cause a problem because Lions Bay can come out and head northbound. But if you get a backup of traffic northbound, we have to rely on Squamish to go southbound, jump over the barrier, and deal. Now, this is assuming that whichever side of the highway is cut off. If both sides are cut off, then we'll send an ambulance from the south, an ambulance from the north, or more from west. This is the beauty of a provincial service. We can just send all of our resources that we need into the area if need be. But yeah, there is a choke point there. On this highway that this is going back some time before my time. I think around the Olympics, when they're building the highway, I believe there was some lobbying for a dividing, an ability to be able to cross. Because once we get northbound out of Lions Bay, we can't cross over to the oncoming traffic because of the divided highway, right? So there's only certain points where you can cross over. And if you have a long line of traffic, we have calls that result in us throw all our gear on the stretcher and we walk up and then know that the southbound ambulance is going to be the one transporting, so we can hand the patient over or to a helicopter, however we need to do that. So there's an inherent flaw there for sure. What can be done about it? Not exactly sure, other than lobbying. The last time this really came to light was, I'm sure you'll all remember, a few years ago, we had a number of EC students that were killed, some young women on the corner there. So there was a bit of a problem at that point. Now we're going back a ways, and my memory's a little bit foggy on that. I wasn't on the call, but my crews were. That's something to consider, and so in terms of moving patients around, if it's a transfer where we don't need to get the patient down, and we level our transfers in different severity, of course, right? You have critical, where somebody is critically injured and or critically ill and needs a higher level of care, intensive care unit, something like that. We try to fly them. And usually we get pretty good access in and out of here, and we've got pretty good access on the highway. We can bring in a hovercraft from Richmond that can come in. We used to do that in the Sunshine Coast when I worked over there, and all over the place. And so we've got ways to do it, but that's not meaning that there's not a better way to do it. In my view, if we could have a little access point for emergency vehicles to spin around, because you're getting the same thing. You get the Britannia Beach Fire Department coming down, or whoever, where everyone's there to work, but you've got to jump through some hoops, and they're all making it work. But I think there's certainly a better way to do it. And I would say that, to get a really fulsome answer on that, we would probably have to talk to the folks that are running those stations now. And
Yeah,
there's certainly a problem there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that could be done to make things safer, and a lot of enhancements have been made on that highway. But and I'm not sure how many enhancements we're going to get on highways right now with this provincial government. They've got a lot of priorities right now, and I wouldn't want to be in their shoes trying to fix the highways in this province. So I think some nice to haves may not get done as quick as we'd like to have. That's probably not a good union statement, but that's the reality of the province we're facing right now, as we've seen some pretty tough times.
Thank you. That addresses my question. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Race.
Thank you. Well, two of my questions have been answered already, and that was who to lobby. And the second was with respect to the surge loading. Although I do have to say, with respect to that, we face that particular challenge on a number of different levels with the province and tourism loads and stuff like that, and impact on parks and the whole thing. So we are familiar with that, and they just somehow don't quite seem to realize it yet. But my last question was really just with respect to the staffing, and how long does it take to become a paramedic, and who does the recruiting, and are they actively recruiting?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So in BC right now, all paramedic levels of training are, except for the critical care, sorry, I'll park that for a side. EMR, emergency medical responder, primary care paramedic, PCP, and ACP, advanced care paramedic, are all done through primarily the JI, the Justice Institute of BC, has the Paramedic Academy. So that's the biggest trainer of paramedics in the province. But there are a number of private colleges that do this, Columbia, other ones. But they're limited by the amount of seats they can have by subsidizing through the advanced education. So all the paramedics that are turned out from these academies get licensed by the provincial government under the EMALB. And critical care paramedics are an addendum, a 2-year addendum to advanced care. So EMRs are a 6-week program, and it's basically built on a first aid ticket, and it's ambulance orientated first aid. Really, I mean, it's advanced in some ways, and it provides basic life support for emergency responses. Primary care has a number of drugs, airway management, diabetics, narcotics, pain management, those sorts of things. So they can provide care in every emergency. All can be, but they have a lot more tools and treatments and drugs that they can treat. And that's why that's a primary level across the province. And that's about a 6-month course. It's 6 months with an additional practicum on car and in the hospitals. So you learn your intravenous's and your cardiac monitoring, and you work in the ICU. So you learn patient assessments in a practical, and then there's an on-car on the ambulance, using our terminologies, practicum, where you ride with an experienced paramedic that's a preceptor, and you have to get so many competencies in each level of care. So that could go from anywhere from 1 month if you're in a busy area and get all your competency, you get a maternity, you get all these things, or it can go up to 3 months to get that practical experience. So essentially from day one, it's about a year to get your primary care paramedic, where you can be cut loose and then the beginning learning from there. And then the advanced care program is another 18 to 2 months to 2 years on top of that, with more extensive in-hospital care, cardiac monitoring, all those sorts of things. And then the critical care is another 2 years from there. And essentially the critical paramedics, the career paramedics, are an emergency department that goes in an ambulance.
And are they actively recruiting now?
Oh, sorry,
That's
the recruitment model. The problem we have right now, and it's been building for a long time, is when I mentioned that on-call precarious work, our recruitment model is into rural and remote BC. That's where you get hired. You come out of the academy, and BCS says you want to hire, so you apply to BCHS. They're the ones that recruit the ambulance service, and they give you options of where you can work. And you generally have to go to a small town to get a number, and then you work up to get full time and more in higher call volume areas. So those are the low call volume areas. And then we have a precarious wages and benefits, where that $2 an hour that you hear about. So they sit on call waiting for a call, and then they only get their paramedic rates when a call comes in. So in Bowen Island, for instance, they'll get hired there, and they are on call until for doing $2 an hour until an actual ambulance call. Then they get their paramedic wage rates there. So we are actively recruiting. So the problem with that model and what's come is we are in a human resources challenge across this province in every industry and profession. And the other thing that's happening is where that's been exposed is that we haven't been able to recruit into the profession because private industry, they can go work on the pipeline and get $500 a day as a paramedic in a truck looking after. So the industry is really drawing a lot of paramedics, because why would you, if you're in Valemont, why would you work on call for $2 an hour? So it's a supply and demand human resources thing. So we are recruiting, but the problem is that model's got to change. And that's the reality of when you have a supply and demand human resources challenge. And the other big challenge we have is that people, when they're deciding what career to go into, there's only so many people that are enticed into this type of work. And that's, there's the healthcare disciplines. They're going into medicine, nursing, or one of the Health Professions Act, because that's what they're drawn to. Or they're going into other public safety disciplines. And all those can offer more wages and benefits and permanent jobs quicker than we can. So, and we've lagged behind in our wages and benefits. And that sounds like a union statement, but that's just the fact that the model's changed. We can't rely on those volunteers anymore, that we're willing just to do it as community service. It's changed to be a profession. And that's really how the transition I've seen over my 34 years, and Sherman's seen over his, is that you just can't rely on the volunteers that are willing to do it, because people want meaningful work, and the demographics have changed. And that model, there's an acknowledgement it's got to change, but it's just not sustainable anymore. And it's affecting absolutely significantly our ability to recruit.
Okay, thank you. I saw a hand from Mr. Hillier, and then if we can probably wrap this up.
I was just going to quickly lay out, in addition, I'm just going to set out, so in relation to the fire department, it's always helpful, I think, for people to understand. So in relation to the fire department and training levels, municipal fire departments will have a level of what's called first responder, called level 3 now. So it's a very, very basic first aid course, as basic, which is exactly what they're there to do. It's airway, breathing, circulation, stop the bleeding, stop the choking, that kind of thing. Then we do this level called emergency medical responder, and you're seeing some communities will go with, because it's quicker and faster to recruit people. But over the years, we've said, look, the primary care paramedic model, which is what you have here, is the model that you want to shoot for. That's where, and we've got that around the province, except for in some small places. But when we come in, there's a big gap when you go from what a firefighter can do, what an emergency medical responder can do, and what a primary care paramedic can do. So the gap from firefighter or EMR to PCP is quite big. And it's not always explained that way. There's a major difference between the two, what those two levels can do. And then when you go from primary care to advanced care to critical care, of course, that grows bigger. But sometimes you'll find a narrative that, what is being done at the fire department level or EMR is good enough. And it's not the level that we ought to be shooting for citizens around the province in terms of when we're recruiting into this profession. That we really start at primary care, and our levels ought to be here going up so that everybody has the same kind of treatment and has the access. There's no reason why folks in LVs in every community around the province can't have that level of care to them.
And what Sherman's talking about is, critical intervention in emergency, and the first responders are a critical part of it. But the PCP is treatment and transport skills. The intervention skills that are needed at scenes and in emergencies are absolutely critical, and we work very well at that. But downloading of provincial responsibilities, as you know, is not something we definitely advocate, and that's something you guys have to push back at municipal levels all the time across this province. And that's just a reality of today's world where budgets are strapped. But I think it's important to know the roles and who's responsible for doing this. And unless it's in the best interest of your community and the citizens, my advice is for municipalities not to take on other people's responsibilities or funding things. Your role, first responders' role, is critical interventions and support of the EMS system. And it's crucial that we have them, but downloading and duplication of services is not in the best interest of patient care or finances, in my view.
Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate the presentation and the better understanding of the challenges you face as you serve our community. And we very much appreciate the service to our community. It's really helpful. I can see that this is an important discussion to continue, but also to have at the regional district. It does sound like coming at the province with a regional voice would be very helpful. So I think these discussions will continue, and thank you once again for joining us.
And you know, I know you've probably got lots more questions, and if something comes up afterwards, by all means, you've got Sherman and I's contacts. I'm happy to come back or have one-on-ones if you have information. And like I said, this is really starting a conversation about what's in best interest of patients and the service. So again, thank you for the extended time today, and I hope we were able to help you understand what the pitfalls and how we can help you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also, I'm in the community here. If you want to have a coffee and talk more in depth, I'm always around and to assist in any way I can. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Council, we'll take a very brief recess till 2 o'clock, and then we'll come back.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are now on to the Lower Mainland Local Government Association call for resolutions. We have a list of what we've put forward and what has happened with it in the past. Stuff we've put forward to LMLGA and UVCM. So this is a bit of an open discussion on what people are interested in seeing us pursue this year. We may want to put forward new resolutions, or we may just want to schedule some minister meetings to remind ministers of these asks. So I'll open the floor and just entertain people's thoughts at this point. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Even before our last conversation, I've been thinking about highway safety a lot. We've had many tragedies in over the years, and even with the sort of the new improved highway from that came online prior to the 2010 Olympics has changed the nature of the incidents, but have also added other issues, like we heard from our previous guests, the paramedics. I'm a little. Last year, I also was thinking about highway safety, and I did this really deep dive into specifics around standards of reflectors and lighting, and it got it sort of came to naught. But I would really like to see something put forward here that shows that there is a need now for improved safety. Now, as to what that is, I had a conversation with Bill Stoner, our fire chief, and he had some ideas. I reached out to Jen Ford, who's as you know, is the chair of SLRD and on the Whistler Council, and they have some things, but they're not quite there yet with what their ask is going to be. So I think there's a something here, and I'm curious to get council's take on specifics or on approach. But I'm also acknowledge that highways in British Columbia are under an exceptional amount of load as far as in need of repair with the damages that happened through the winter. So I don't know. I'd like to get some feedback from my council mates as to if this is something that we should try to pursue at this time. I'd like to make some noise and have it on the radar that, you know, year over year, I'd like to see one little piece of it improved and kind of make me feel better that things are improving, you know, over time. But we've been at a bit of a stalemate there for quite some time, in my opinion. So I'm curious to see if anyone else has any thoughts on that, and whether the timing, kind of a timing thing as well, I guess, to consider. So.
Mayor Elliott.
Through the chair, I guess to me, the resolution has to have provincial impact and would need to be specific. And also the ministry is very focused this year on rehabilitating highways. So And I think if you went back through all the resolution books, you would see, I don't know, tens of resolutions about highways. So I think that's our challenge. I think potentially working with our colleagues in the corridor on approaching the minister to talk specifically about sea to sky might be a more impactful approach. We know from our engagement with previous Minister of Transportation and starting with this one, we have a number of intersections that we're concerned about. So maybe that's the approach, because I'm just not sure how you would word a motion that would get support provincially when we've got so many major highways that are basically have been patched together right now.
Councillor French.
Thanks, Chair. And I totally understand where Councillor Herford's head is on this one. And I agree. Anything we can do, I want to see us do. And with the opportunity to build back better for highway systems that were devastated by the storms, I would like to see that. And I also feel like the work that we are doing on the specific intersections that are of significant concern to us is really where I want to see us put our energy. And I spend a fair amount of time, or I'm frequently traveling Highway 99 southbound at Alice Lake during high volume times. And it breaks my heart when I see people sitting at either like coming out of Alice Lake, trying to make a left-hand turn to go south in just chocker block traffic. There are no breaks between 4:30 and 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening. Something needs to be done about that intersection. And so I feel like the work that we are currently doing and have put energy into focused on those intersections is what we need to continue to focus on.
Councillor Herford.
No, thank you. I like the approach of approaching minister around highway safety, and I think we could go through nearly every intersection in Squamish and see that it has room for improvement. But I also think that there are stretches, specific areas along the 99 that could use some help, but that might be addressed better in a minister meeting. But also, regional transit. I want to make sure that we don't, that we choose the right drum to bang here, because I do want, I do see a need for that. Regional transit is extremely important and also has knock-on safety effects that are undeniable. So, yeah, I'm good with that approach. We'll figure out which topic to breach, but I think minister meeting is the appropriate place. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Anderson.
Chair, on the topic of roads and highways, just a couple of brief comments. One of the resolutions we brought to the UBCM, which was endorsed in 2020, was practical measures for resource roads. That involved recommending a system of classification of resource roads and also local platforms for information exchange and dialogue about their management. Why this affects Squamish, but it is also province-wide, is that, for example, our community forest has some heavily trafficked roads, or it will have, but for recreational uses. And a classification system will alleviate the burden, the cost burden for the community forest. This applies all through the province. The province has not, in its response, activated it on any of those, either of those suggestions at this time. But in relation to Councillor Herford's suggestion or the discussion, I think this now is not the time to press this further. I conceived this resolution as a stage one, coming back later to set up the province for actually investing money. And I think that this is not the time to do that with all of the havoc that was created with our weather this winter. That's one comment. So I think that's sort of something we should keep our eye on, especially as our community forest becomes activated. We will at firsthand see the dilemmas of resource roads and who pays for their maintenance. Secondly, on the topic of highway intersections, I note in the 2019 UBCM ministers meeting information package we have been passed on to us, there's one intersection missing. And that is Site B, Mamco Forest Service Road. And that is it is always left off the list, or too often. And we need to keep that in mind. It's part of that list of intersections. And it came up during the Squamish Canyon development proposal, and where engineering staff reported that, well, the stakeholders at Site B, including Squamish Asian, haven't done anything on this since 2016. That is a misunderstanding. It is a standing commitment by the district to work with those stakeholders to lobby highways, not something that we abandoned in 2016 or put it on the shelf at all. It is a standing need, and a very critical one, as the stakeholders there would point out. And with increased traffic there, all of the Squamish Forestry trucks now using that intersection. So Site B, the Mamco Forest Service Road intersection, it should not be left off that list. That happens too often. Those are my comments on the roads and highways, Chair.
Okay, Council, any more thoughts on this topic? Just while I'm giving everyone a couple minutes, I went through the list, and I think we've had good success in our resolution. I was paying attention to a number of our resolutions which help support what also came through Help Cities Lead. A lot of the topics in terms of emission ratings and so on ended up in mandate letters. And so I feel that there's good progress on some of those topics that we have put forward resolutions on. So my inclination at this point is, to the degree we pursue those, it is better with minister meetings at this point rather than additional resolutions. But I think, we have a number of topics to discuss with the ministers. And so I guess we'll have to sort through which ones we pick. I think my understanding is the focus of this meeting is if there's anything we want to put forward in a new resolution. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands at this. Oh, Councillor Anderson.
Chair, I wonder if I could make another comment on the last item under minister meetings, and it's a comment on the presentation we have here. There are two property tax issues that have been conflated here, and that is something we need to be aware of and to avoid. One of them is a wood fiber assessment of an LNG plant here locally. The other one is the issue of commercial properties or tenants in areas. It is an issue for downtown on Cleveland, and they're two totally different topics, but they appear to be conflated here with a general concept of economic development impacts, but they are very different. And I would suggest further that the topic of the downtown property tax assessment for one-story buildings on Cleveland that have been zoned for another 4, 5, 6, or 4 or 5 stories in our case down there, so that the tenants in a situation where they're paying triple net lease, they are being hurt. That applies to Squamish in a small way. It applies to the Lower Mainland in a large way. And the Lower Mainland has been very active with the province, with the support of the UBCM and I think the provincial mayors. But there has been some new developments on this that we should watch. And so I just wanted to flag that is a distinct property tax topic, and that we should, of course, watch the other one too. But one of the things that's been brought up lately is that in the Vancouver discussion is that if the speculation and vacancy tax were to be applied to Squamish, it would in fact be applied to air. It would apply to those unbuilt units above one-story buildings that are zoned for 4, 5, 6 stories. And that's just something to watch because we have discussed this. There's been public discussion of the application or non-application of the speculation vacancy tax to the District of Squamish. But this whole topic is one that is evolving. There's been some response from the Lower Mainland municipalities to the province, and I won't go into further detail, but there is some very handy web page on the part of the City of Vancouver that lays it all out with some updates. So I suggest we should follow this, and perhaps we should have more active liaison, maybe through the Lower Mainland Local Government Association, to make sure that they're aware of us and that we're interested with our downtown and other streets where we have this property tax situation. That's it on that topic. Thank you.
Okay. I am not seeing any more hands. Oh, sorry, Councilor Race.
Thank you. And I actually didn't, when I looked at this before the meeting, I didn't have any suggestions, but after the presentation, I'm wondering if we want to consider something along the lines of the surge loading. That's the one I think that maybe applies to us more than perhaps a lot of other communities. I mean, it sounds like the entire model is broken in a number of different places. And that's a provincial issue, of course. But just as you watch the local media, you know, there's an awful lot of interest in the ambulance service right now, as the presenter mentioned, because of the heat dome and the deaths surrounding the heat dome and the criticism of the whole health system for that. So it's a live topic, and you would expect there's going to be pressure from the whole province, really, to deal with some of the issues that came out of that. But when you think of the local issue, to me, the biggest one is going to be the staffing for the surges, and whether we want to consider, with the rest of our corridor, making presentations along that load. It would apply, of course, to other municipalities as well. He mentioned Osoyoos, for example. But I think on a regular basis, when you look at the size of Whistler compared to other resorts in province, it's massive. And it's a relatively small town. And of course, all the people that get there seem to have to drive through Squamish. So it certainly affects us, and there's spin-off right through the corridor. So I think it is a corridor issue that we might consider taking forward on that aspect of it. Well, if the province is going to start looking at the ambulance service, they might start considering that aspect of it as well.
Thank you. If I can clarify with my colleague, is the suggestion that, I guess, is it sufficient that our SLRD reps, we ask our reps to raise this with the SLRD, or would you prefer us to take more direct local action?
I think this is one of those circumstances, like has occurred several times in the past, where it's more of a joint submission. And if we were all together in this, and I'm thinking Squamish, Whistler, Pemberton, and the SLRD, to consider a joint submission on this point, because it affects us all, really. That kind of surge loading affects the whole corridor.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to sort out what the ask is here. If we need a resolution, would you, guess I'm looking for some direction here. If you would like to take that on and bring a resolution for us to support at the next meeting, or how you would like us to move forward with this. I think there's some sympathy I'm gathering for the idea.
Well, I actually wasn't signed up for LMLGA.
Okay, I see a hand from Mayor
But I'll
Elliott.
help with that if you want.
So a couple of suggestions. I would say that we could ask Legislative Services staff to look at prior resolutions having to do with the ambulance service, so that we're not repeating anything. And second, I have a meeting next Friday with the mayors in the corridor, and could test their appetite for a joint resolution regarding ambulance services that might be worded in such a way that it would have provincial appeal, and then could bring that back for consideration. But those would be my suggestions. So one, there might already be resolutions out there that other communities have put forward, and we might just want to use them along with our colleagues in the corridor to set up a minister meeting and just further things that already exist. So that's my big thing about resolutions, that often we forget that there's resolutions from 2016 or 2014 that really haven't gone anywhere, that we should just get on board with and help promote through the system. And the best way to do that is through our minister meetings. So anyway, that would be my suggestion, Chair, as how to proceed versus putting Councillor Race on the spot. But happy to hear from others.
Okay, I like putting Councillor Race on the spot. It was kind of fun, but I'll throw it back to Councillor Race.
Thank you. And I think that is a good idea. I'm fine with that.
Okay, should we have a resolution to direct staff to investigate prior resolutions and also to have the mayor follow up at the mayor's meeting on the topic? Is that Councillor French moves that? Councillor Herford seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, is there anything else anyone wanted to raise? Okay, I think we are good for now. I believe we have a bit of time if anyone has some last minute thoughts. I believe these are due in March, but it's not something to forget about if you are interested in. And we will proceed now to the next agenda item. Actually, let's give ourselves until 2:30 just to give Mr. Buxton some time to connect with us. So we'll come back at, Sarah McJanet, I guess.
No, I'll be handling this.
Okay, are you ready to go now, Mr. Buxton, or would you like a few minutes?
No, I can do this very quickly if council so wishes.
Okay, yeah, we just had a break, so let's proceed then.
Just very quickly is we did speak to the groups involved about their resource requests to the district with respect to phase 1 anyway, and the data collection and participation in that committee seems to be relatively small and manageable with the staff that we have on hand. So we don't have any concerns with respect to phase 1. Phase 2 will get determined in large part through the work in phase 1. That's an entirely different set of resource demands potentially. But as far as phase 1 goes, we're okay to provide the letter of support that's suggested and attached to the update memo. So simply, we're okay on phase 1 as far as staffing resource demands. So.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Elliott.
Do these organizations have a sense of what phase 2 looks like, Mr. Buxton, or are we just going to focus on phase 1, and then after phase 1 results, we'll think about imagining phase 2 and the resources required for that?
I think they have a reasonable understanding of the scope. My concern is whether or not whether the other parties, particularly at the provincial level, are willing to invest into this. My concern is that if we don't get significant buy-in from the province, this is a very, very heavy lift for us. So phase 2 is, I think, scope, scale, and impact of phase 2 is very dependent on the ability of the group to get some traction on this at the provincial level.
Okay, Council, then I guess we have, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I have an observation to make and a question. This is an ambitious project, or potentially ambitious. We're not quite clear yet of what will unfold for phase 2. We have in our corridor and in the Howe Sound region, as the Howe Sound Biosphere Region Initiative are well aware, because they've dealt with this at an intense level, and that is we have a land and resource management plan that our district of Squamish has signed off on. So is the Squamish Nation and the recreation sector and many other stakeholders. We also have a Squamish Estuary Management Plan, which is also a higher level plan, which the district and other stakeholders have signed off on. And a third item to mention is the new landscape management plans that the forest tenure holders will be putting together. And these replace the current forest stewardship plans. For example, our Squamish Community Forest will need a forest stewardship plan, but in future, it will produce a landscape management plan. So my observation is that this needs to be taken into account, these higher level plans, in the scoping of phase 1 and whatever might be undertaken in phase 2. The actors in this proposal need to be fully aware of what already exists and the stakeholders that already exist in existing landscape plans. And so my question is whether there might be an amendment to the letter from the district that is the last page of our package here. And I'm just going to look at it here. It's just a draft letter, January X. So it is. The very last sentence states that the municipality will participate in intergovernmental working groups to contribute to and guide the project design as needed. However, the introductory piece authored by Ms. McJanet also refers to stakeholder committees. There's two distinct, there's reference to both a establishment of a stakeholder committee and intergovernmental working group. It's my suggestion that the stakeholder committee needs to be addressed in the district letter, or that we should consider this, because after all, these existing plans have a host of stakeholders that will be directly impacted by the outcomes of a phase 2 or the outcomes of the overall project. So in the last line of the district letter, draft letter, I would suggest we consider adding the stakeholder committee in addition to the intergovernmental working group. That gives opportunity for forest tenure holders, recreation tenure holders to have a direct involvement. But perhaps this is a question to Mr. Buxton, whether that has been considered. Otherwise, I'd be prepared to put forward a motion to that effect.
I think at this point, our anticipation was not getting involved in a number of committees on this, is that working on this intergovernmental working group or groups, which should, in all honesty, bring in the affected agencies that Councillor Anderson has referenced. I would prefer that we keep our involvement fairly tight at this point in time and not commit ourselves to involvement in a number of potential other groups that may have coincident interests on this. It's just my preference is to stick to the group or groups that is formed here and not get involved in other groups that may be related to it.
Very good, Mr. Buxton. I take your advice on this. Then if I could just have my observation noted, and that we can be careful to emphasize to the other government agencies that we do expect that they will be in liaison with their clients that have management plans and tenures that will be affected by this, at least for the time being. So I'll just then go along with Mr. Buxton's suggestion that we keep things tight at this time, just as long as we're all aware that there are major stakeholder issues that may arise. Thank you.
Understood.
Mayor Elliott.
I'd like to move the letter of support, please.
Great, so moved. Councillor Herford, are you seconding? And second, any discussion? Seeing none, anyone opposed? No, motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Just checking my agenda here. So I think, do we need a motion to close now? Is that, so Councillor Herford is moving. Sound like Councillor Ray seconds. Anyone opposed? Nope, motion carries. So we are closed. We will come back at 2:45. on the closed link. Yeah. 15, yeah, so 2:45 gives us 15? Okay. Order to 3 on the closed link, everyone. Thank you.